Hello, I want to welcome you to discussion on an important area in sociology of work and occupation. In this study, we want to look at how workers in an organization are disciplined. Basically, we call it punishing of workers. We want to understand what is meant by punishment, the various types of punishments that workers are subjected to, of course, based on the kind of offenses committed or mistakes committed. And then we shall conclude our discussion by examining some of the principles that organizations need to observe when punishing their workers. Remember, we earlier on talked about rewards. In organizations, you are rewarded if you work according to the expectations. However, you get punishment or you get punished if your behavior falls outside the normative structures and regulations of organizations. So welcome to this important discussion. What punishment is generally meant to condition a person to avoid self-endangerment, impose social conformity, defend norms of an organization or society, protect people against future harms, maintain law, and respect the rules of law. When we look at these definitions, what comes out clearly is that punishment is designed to inflict some form of pain to the offender. The pain can be physical or it can be psychological, as well as loss of privileges. So, when you talk about punishment, in the context of work and occupation, we basically mean those measures that are taken by organization to ensure that workers who have gone against the regulations are subjected to some form of psychological pain so that they may live to realize that it is wrong for them, and also those who intend to commit mistakes that are avoidable, a message is sent to them that when you go against the regulations or the stipulations of the organization, then you may be subjected to some kind of pain. Many times, the pain that workers are subjected to is largely psychological and social. Rarely are workers subjected to physical pain, as a way of punishment by the organization. Is punishment. Punishment refers to the imposition of undesirable or unpleasant outcome upon a group or individuals that is meted by an authority. Punishment can also be defined as the infliction of pain or loss upon a person for the transgression of a law or command. We can also understand punishment as the deliberate infliction of suffering on perceived or actual offender for an offense such as a moral or legal transgression. There are certain conditions that an action constitutes punishment. One, it is imposed by an authority. This authority could be single or it could be multiple. Again, an action constitutes punishment if it involves some loss to the offender. Otherwise, if an offender doesn't feel any loss, then there is no way the pain that we talked about earlier, be it physical or social and psychological, can be felt. Again, an action is considered punishment if it is a response to an offense. Otherwise, if a person is subjected to pain, whether social, psychological or physical pain, and then the person is unable to relate that pain to any offense he or she has committed, then there is no way that person will perceive that condition as punishment. Lastly, an action is considered punishment if the person to whom the loss is imposed is deemed to be responsible for the offense. That is, if a punishment is directed to a wrong person, that is, a person who has not committed an offense that the punishment is being instituted against, then we cannot call that as punishment. So punishment, and rather an action, constitutes a punishment if it is directed to an individual who is perceived to have been responsible for the offense that has been committed. If a wrong person is punished and later on the person or the authority that subjected him or her to punishment comes to learn that the person was not meant to be punished, then the person may have to be compensated in one way or the other. And the person who acted by punishing a wrong person, may he or herself be subjected to punishment for not carrying out thorough investigation to link the offense committed to the individual being punished. Punishment can come in many forms. In other words, workers can be punished in many forms. So I want us to look at the types of punishment that are meted on workers. One of the forms of punishment that workers are subjected to is called warnings. Warnings can either be verbal or written. In other words, a worker who has committed mistake can be verbally warned and reminded that he or she has committed a mistake. Or a worker can be warned through a written notice that is issued to him or her, stipulating or stating the kind of offenses the individual has committed. Verbal warnings is normally given against minor violations. They include uncivilized behavior, for instance, urinating in a place that is not designated can result to a verbal warning, or delays at work, that is, reporting to work late, laziness, meaning not fully concentrating on the work that is being carried out, ignorance might mean not being aware of basic rules governing workers' conduct, or unauthorized departure from work. For instance, if you leave for lunch at a time that is not designated, for instance, if workers are required to leave for lunch at 1 and you choose to leave at 12:30 without seeking the permission of your seniors, the moment that matter comes to the attention of your seniors, you may be issued with a verbal warning. However, persistent violation of these rules may lead to the issuance of written warnings. A written warning is issued for offenses such as sleeping at the workplace, professional negligence, which may lead to damage of property, disobedience, absence from work without prior permission, or without notifying the authorities. Written warning is a more serious type of warning. It is more serious than the verbal warning. Persistent issuance of written warning might pave way to other types of punishment depending on the gravity and frequency with which such written warnings are issued. Many times, a worker, when issued with written warnings up to 3 times within 6 months, then that worker can now be subjected to more harsher punishments. Another way through which workers may be punished is to deny them certain benefits. Denial of benefits such as pay occurs when workers fail to work for the unexplained or unsatisfactory reasons. For instance, if a worker absents him or herself from work without permission or without a proper justification, such as sickness, bereavement, or a condition that is fairly understandable, then that worker may be denied the benefit. The amount of money may be deducted that is equivalent to the number of days that that worker could have earned for the days that he or she failed to work. Therefore, benefits such as salary may also be deducted in cases that involve damage or loss of property. For instance, if you are entrusted with a company property, say a laptop, and out of negligence you lose that laptop, and the circumstances under which it is lost is either not clear or satisfactory to the organization, then organization might punish you by deducting your salary for a given period of time until the deductions are equivalent to the amount of the laptop or the property that you lost. So this system of denial of benefits has also been effectively used in ensuring that employees are careful and they observe caution and greater concern when they are holding or when they are in charge of company property. Benefits may also be denied where persistent cases of misuse of company property is noticeable. For instance, use of company car for personal errands may lead to the withdrawal of such services. If, for instance, a worker, given his position, is entitled to a company car, probably and the driver, and it comes to the attention of the management that the worker is using the company car for purposes that are not in any way related to the work that he or she has been assigned, then that worker can be denied that car forthwith. If, for instance, a worker is using a company car, say, to transport personal items from one place to another, or is using the company car to ferry passengers in exchange for some money in form of fare and other benefits, then that is misuse of company car. And in the process, the management may either decide to fine you in addition to withdrawing the company car from the worker. That one can happen, and it has happened to many organizations, and that it has happened to many individuals in organizations. Another type of punishment that a worker may be subjected to is called suspension. Written suspensions are forms of punishment which are used when verbal warnings and written reprimands and performance improvements, improvement plans are failed. Suspension is a punishment for serious offenses and may be for a certain period, ranging say from 1 day to several weeks or months. A worker, when serving a suspension, receives reduced pay, and full payment can only be resumed when the suspension is over or when it is withdrawn. For organizations, suspension means loss of the employee for the day off. That is, an organization will miss the skills, the services, and the knowledge of that employee during that time that he or she is serving suspension. To an employer or to a worker, suspension can result into a more negative frame of mind than before the layoff. Apart from reduced earnings because of reduced pay, suspension might also subject a worker to a lot of psychological trauma, because work, as we had noted earlier, is not just merely a place where we earn income. It's also a place where we develop relationships, and these relationships, they help us in our social growth. Therefore, when you're suspended, it means that you may not be on a day-to-day contact with your colleagues at work, and in the process you remain isolated. That isolation, if not properly addressed, may become a source of stress to a worker. Demotion is yet another type of punishment that a worker may be subjected to. Demotion refers to a permanent reassignment to a lower position than the one the employee had previously. Demotion leads to a reduction in rank, a reduction in benefits, as well as loss of privileges that are associated with senior positions. Demotion may come due to indiscipline, persistent lateness, misconduct, negligence, or merely poor performance. Demotion is used to punish serious offenses where suspension has not been effective and management wants to avoid termination or dismissal. In other words, when an employee is demoted, the employee earns less compared to what he used to earn before. Again, it might also lead to loss of certain benefits because certain positions are attached with certain benefits. Meaning, therefore, once you are no longer holding those positions, then the benefits and privileges that go with such positions you no longer enjoy. And the demotion, as has been put there, is as a result of a number of factors. If you persistently become late despite warning, then you can be demoted. If you have shown certain conduct that are in contravention of the basic rules of the organization, again, you may be demoted. Again, you can also be demoted if there is strong evidence that you are persistently performing poorly. The assumption an organization makes when you poorly perform is that the level of your skills, commitment, and ability does not match the position that you hold, and therefore you need to be downgraded to a lower position that possibly matches your skills, your level of commitment, as well as ability. Like we have seen again, demotion is a serious, and sometimes when a worker is demoted, it may actually be a favor to the worker. Otherwise, offenses that lead to demotion in many times either result in termination or dismissal of a worker. So if an organization does not want to dismiss or terminate a worker, then such workers may be slapped with demotion. In other words, demotion is a way of sending a strong message to the employee or to the worker that persistent indulgence in behaviors that led to a demotion may now warrant the organization to either terminate or dismiss you from the service. There are certain conditions that an action constitutes punishment. One, it is imposed by an authority. This authority could be single or it could be multiple. Again, an action constitutes punishment if it involves some loss to the offender. Otherwise, if an offender doesn't feel any loss, then there is no way the pain that we talked about earlier, be it physical or social and psychological, can be felt. Again, an action is considered punishment if it is a response to an offense. Otherwise, if a person is subjected to pain, whether social, psychological, or physical pain, and then the person is unable to relate that pain to any offense he or she has committed, then there is no way that person will perceive that condition as punishment. Lastly, an action is considered punishment if the person whom the loss is imposed is deemed to be responsible for the offense. That is, if a punishment is directed to a wrong person, that is, a person who has not committed an offense that the punishment is being instituted against, then we cannot call that as punishment. So punishment, and rather an action, constitutes a punishment if it is directed to an individual who is perceived to have been responsible for the offense that has been committed. If a wrong person is punished, what is dismissal? Dismissal is the ultimate form of punishment meted on workers, and it is considered the most severe punishment an employer can give. A worker can be dismissed for serious offenses such as theft, destruction of property, fights, drug use, and gross disobedience. Other offenses that might lead to termination are those relating to forgery, absenteeism, refusal to carry out lawful duties, as well as endangering the lives of others. In dismissal, a worker is not only separated from the organization, but the worker is also deprived of benefits such as gratuity, provident fund, pension, and other perquisites. I think we learned among the rewards what perquisites are. However, it is recommended that because of the severe nature of dismissal, organizations must carry out thorough investigations to affirm that the offenses that a worker is being accused to have committed were actually committed, and evidence that is sufficient is available, so that before organizations dismiss an employee, they must ensure that they have sufficient ground to use dismissal as the most remedy to the problem caused by the worker. Otherwise, if the offenses are not so much serious, then the other type of punishment can be applied. Workers sometimes seek redress in courts if they perceive dismissal as either too harsh or inappropriate for the kind of mistakes they are being accused of. And when such matters are presented to court and the workers present the case and the court make decisions in their favor, it normally becomes a very big cost to the organization. The organization will find sometimes might be forced to reinstate the worker, or sometimes might be forced to pay so much heavily as a compensation to the worker. Other than that, organization's reputation might also be affected because it might be perceived as one that is trigger happy in terms of dismissing employees without carrying out due diligence to ensure that the offenses committed were actually committed by the person, or the offenses committed warranted dismissal. It's an issue that needs to be thoroughly looked at because it has serious economic, social, and psychological consequences to an employee.